He left me at the altar for his high school ex, so I took our honeymoon alone. He left me at the altar on a Saturday in June, which was bad enough, and then it turned out he had booked the honeymoon in my name only, which is how I found out the leaving had not been a decision he made that morning. You don't book a solo trip under one name and then stand at an altar with every intention of staying. The resort confirmation said one guest, one name, mine, and it had been booked 4 months prior, and the deposit was non-refundable, so I went. My dress was already in the car. I changed at a gas station 30 minutes from the airport and left the dress folded on the passenger seat, and I took the carry-on I had packed for 2 and I boarded alone, and the gate agent clocked the situation immediately, the way people who work at airports do, and she upgraded my seat and said, "Congratulations," and I said, "Not quite," and she said, "I know, I can tell. Congratulations on surviving it," which is the best thing anyone said to me that week. She also moved me to a window seat on the water side without asking, and I looked out that window for 3 hours over the water and the mountains and did not cry once, not because I was not sad, but because what was outside the glass made the sadness feel correctly proportioned, which was what I needed. The resort was in the mountains, not a beach, because Hollis had chosen it, the kind of place you go when you want to disappear, and I had spent 2 years mistaking accommodation for compatibility. The dumber he thinks I am, the more rope he'll hand me. Check-in was smooth until the agent looked at the reservation and said very carefully, "This is actually flagged from last time," and I said, "What last time?" And she went pale in the way of someone who has just introduced new information to a conversation they thought they were only closing, and she said that there had been a previous stay under the same reservation name 6 weeks ago, and that there had been a situation, and the flag was to offer a different room from the one originally booked because of the associations. 6 weeks ago, Hollis and I had been together. 6 weeks ago, I had been planning a wedding. 6 weeks ago, Hollis had told me he was in Dallas for a work conference. I asked what kind of situation. She said she wasn't able to give details, but that if I wanted to speak to the manager, she would call him now. The manager came out and he was kind and professional, and what he told me was that 6 weeks ago, 2 guests had stayed in the suite I had reserved, and that the second guest had left unexpectedly on the second night, and that the first guest had asked the staff not to contact the reservation name for any reason, a request they had accommodated up to the point where it became clear the departure was not entirely voluntary. He said the second guest had left a note, sealed, with my name on it, at the front desk, with a request that it be delivered if the reservation name ever checked in alone. He was holding the envelope. I took the envelope to the suite, which was large and beautiful and arranged for 2 people, and I sat on the edge of the bed and held it for a long time before I opened it. Her name was Wren. I didn't know that until I read the note, but once I read it, I understood immediately who she was, because Hollis had mentioned her once, casually, as a friend from before, someone from years ago. No weight to it, the tone you use specifically to prevent weight from attaching. The note was not long. She said she was sorry for what had happened. She said she had not known about me when she came here with him, that she had believed something different about their arrangement, and that finding out the truth in this specific place had been its own kind of clarification. She said she was okay, that the car had taken her somewhere safe, that I should not worry about her. And then, at the bottom, the 2 sentences I have been turning over ever since. He told me he was leaving someone at an altar to come back to me. He said it like it was romantic. I don't think he told you that part. I put the note on the bed. I stood at the window and looked at the mountains, and it was genuinely beautiful, and I was genuinely destroyed. And then my phone rang, and it was my mother, and she said, "Hollis is here. He came to your parents' house. He says he made a mistake. He says it's over with her and it's over with the other one, and there's something you don't know yet that he wants to tell you himself." I said, "What other one?" And my mother said, "That's what I asked." I said, "Mom, tell me exactly what he said, word for word. Don't clean it up." Octavia was quiet for a second, and then she said, "He said, I panicked. Wren was a mistake, but there's someone else you need to know about, and I want to be the one to tell her, not you." I felt my chest get tight, but it wasn't the kind of tight that comes from missing someone, because listen to those words. Really listen. He didn't say he was sorry. He said he wanted to be the one to tell me. He was already deciding who got to know what and when. He was sitting on my mother's porch, supposedly falling apart, and he was still managing the information like it was a project with moving parts, and he was the only one who could see the full picture. That is not what a broken man does. That is what a man who is scared of losing control does. I said, "Mom, do not let him leave that house. Do not give him my number at the resort. Do not tell him where I am. Nothing." Octavia got quiet again, and then she said, "Honey, he's sitting on the porch steps right now. He's been crying. He looks like he hasn't eaten. He seems genuinely broken." And I get it. Hollis could do that. Hollis could sit in front of anyone and make them feel like they were watching someone come apart, because Hollis understood what people needed to see in order to feel sorry for him. So I said, "Mom, he booked this trip for one person 4 months ago. One guest. My name only. He was planning this before he bought the boutonniere." And there was this long silence, long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. Then Octavia's voice came back, lower, harder. The mom voice that doesn't come out often, but when it does, you know something has shifted inside her permanently. She said, "I'll keep him here." I hung up, and I sat there on the edge of that big, beautiful bed in a room meant for 2 people, and I picked up Wren's note again. This time I wasn't reading for information. I was reading for something I had missed, and I found it. He said it like it was romantic. He told Wren he was leaving someone at the altar to come back to her, and the way he said it was like he was offering her something precious. Like leaving me standing there in front of everyone I loved was not a thing he was doing to me, but a thing he was doing for her. He framed walking away from our wedding as a grand gesture, a proof of love, like I was just the obstacle in his love story, the thing he had to step over to get to the real thing. I sat with that for a minute, maybe 2. I let it land all the way, and then something in me got very still and very clear, the kind of clear that doesn't feel like emotion at all. It just feels like knowing. I opened my laptop. I sat at the little desk by the window, and I started writing things down. Not a letter, not a journal entry, a timeline, every date I could remember, every trip Hollis had taken in the last 2 years, every time he said he was somewhere for work, the resort booking, 4 months before the wedding, 1 guest, the trip 6 weeks ago when he told me he was at a conference, Wren's note, what the manager had told me about the resort driver overhearing Wren on the phone saying, "He's done this before, there was someone before me too," what Octavia had repeated to me, every word, and when I lined up all the dates against what I now knew, 3 of his work trips didn't match. Not in the obvious way, but in the quiet way, where the details were a little too thin. Or he came back from a 4-day work trip without a single story about a coworker or a bad hotel. Those trips had no texture. They were just gaps. And then there were 2 weekends he said he had been with Ben. Ben was Hollis's best friend, and I had never had any reason to question it when Hollis said he was crashing at Ben's place to watch a game. But now I was looking at those weekends on my timeline, and they were sitting right next to the gaps. And something about the spacing felt wrong, felt planned, and I picked up my phone and texted Ben. Simple, short. Hey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did Hollis stay with you the weekend of March 10th? Under a minute. Ben wrote back, no. He asked me to say he did. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Then Ben called. He sounded wrecked. He said, I covered for him twice, and I hated myself both times. He said Hollis had told him it was complicated, that he was trying to end things with someone from his past, and he didn't want to hurt me while he sorted it out. Ben said, I believed him the first time. The second time I told him straight up, I said, this is not something I'm going to keep doing for you. He stopped asking me after that. I think he just found other people to cover for him. I asked Ben if he knew who the other women were. He was quiet for a second, and then he said, I only know about Ren. I swear. I believed him. Ben's voice had the sound of someone telling the truth because the truth was the only thing left that felt clean. I thanked him and I hung up, and I sat on the balcony of that suite with the mountains going dark at the edges, and I felt something I did not expect. Not rage, not sadness. This strange, cold, clear thing, like stepping out of a warm room into winter air and realizing you can suddenly see for miles. Day 3, I went for a hike, a ridge trail the manager had recommended, the kind that makes your legs burn and your lungs open up and your brain go quiet. I was about halfway up when my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I opened the message and it said, hi, I think we need to talk. My name is Nimue. Hollis gave me this number. I stopped walking. I stood on that trail with my boots in the dirt and I read it again. Nimue. That was the other one. The name Octavia hadn't known. The one Hollis had been so careful to mention without actually saying. The one he wanted to tell me about himself before anyone else could. And now here she was, texting me from a number I had never seen. And the first thing she told me was that Hollis had given her my number, which meant Hollis was still doing it. He was still deciding who talked to whom and when and in what order. He had handed my number to this woman like a chess piece, like a move he was making. Control. I put the phone back in my pocket and I kept hiking. I needed the rest of that trail more than I needed to answer a text from another woman Hollis had lied to, and whatever she had to say would still be there when I got to the top. I climbed until the trees thinned out and the ridge opened up, and I sat on a flat rock and looked out at 3 valleys spreading out below me in green and gold and shadow, and the world was so big and so quiet, and Hollis was so small from up here, and I took out my phone and typed, I'm listening. She responded fast. She said she and Hollis had been together for 5 months. 5 months that overlapped with the last 5 months of my engagement. She said Hollis had told her the engagement was already over, that it was a formality, that he was staying in it until after a family event, and then he was leaving. She said, I found out the truth the same day you did. I watched a video his cousin posted of the ceremony setup. He was still going through with it. I called him and he didn't answer. That was the morning of your wedding. 5 months. I counted backward in my head, and 5 months ago was January. And in January, I had been picking out invitations and arguing with a florist about peonies, and sitting across from Hollis at dinner talking about whether we wanted a DJ or a band, and the whole time, every tasting, every dress fitting, every conversation about who sits next to who at the reception, he had been building something else with someone else, telling her a completely different story. Nimue sent another message. She said, I just think you deserve to know who you were standing next to. I typed back, I'm starting to. Nimue asked if I knew about Ren. I said yes. There was a long pause, and then Nimue wrote, he told me Ren was from years ago. He said I was the only one. I'm guessing he told her the same thing. 3 women, 3 versions of the same lie, each one designed to make the person hearing it feel like they were the real thing, and everyone else was the mistake. I asked Nimue one more question. Did he ever tell you about this resort? She said yes. He described it as a place he had been before, a place that meant something to him. He never mentioned bringing anyone else. He had been describing this resort to Nimue like it was their future. I thanked Nimue. I told her I hoped she was okay. She wrote back, I'm getting there, faster than I expected. Turns out it's easier to heal from someone once you realize they were never real. I saved the whole conversation. Then I put my phone away and I sat on that rock and I breathed, and I felt something close to steady. Not healed, not fine, steady. That night I finally listened to the voicemail Hollis had left 2 days before. His voice was low, careful. It had that quality he could do where everything sounded like it was coming from somewhere deep and honest. He said, I know you found things out. I know it looks bad, but you don't have the full picture, and I need you to let me explain before you make any decisions. I listened to it once and felt the pull of his voice doing what his voice always did. Then I played it a second time, and the second time I heard what I had missed. Before you make any decisions. Not before you decide about us. Before you make any decisions. He was not worried about losing me. He was worried about what I might do with what I knew. He wasn't calling to win me back. He was calling to find out how much damage control he needed to do. I deleted the voicemail. Day 5 I checked out of the resort. The manager walked me to the car. He opened the door for me and said, I hope the mountains gave you what you needed. I looked up at the ridge where I had sat 2 days ago and I said, they gave me time. That was enough. I drove away and the mountains got smaller in the mirror and I let them. At the airport I took out my phone and texted Hollis. I said, I'll meet you tomorrow. The coffee shop on the corner by my apartment. 11 in the morning. Come alone. If you bring anyone or try to make a scene, I leave and you never hear from me again. He responded so fast I knew he had been holding his phone waiting for exactly this. He wrote, I'll be there. Thank you. I love you. I did not respond. 11 the next morning I got there first. I had the timeline in my bag, printed out, every date and every lie in neat rows. I had Ren's note photographed on my phone. I had Nimue's texts saved. I had Ben's confirmation. I was not planning to pull any of it out unless I needed to. Hollis walked in at 11:02. He looked like he had not slept in days. His eyes were red and his hands were shaking, and he sat down across from me and said, thank you for seeing me. I looked at him and I said, tell me everything, from the beginning, and I will know if you're lying because I already know most of it. He took a breath and started talking. He said Ren had reached out to him 8 months ago. ago. He said it brought up old feelings he thought he had dealt with. He said he tried to end it but couldn't. He said Nimue was different, that she was someone he met through work, that it was never serious. He said the resort trip was a mistake, a moment of weakness. He said he booked the honeymoon in my name only because he was ashamed and thought if he went through with the wedding he could leave everything else behind and start clean. He said he panicked at the altar because Ren had called him that morning and told him she knew about the wedding and about Nimue. He said, I chose wrong. I know that now. I am choosing you now. I let him finish. I let every word land on the table between us. And then I said, you booked this trip for one person 4 months ago. You didn't panic at the altar. You planned to leave. You told Ren you were leaving me at the altar like it was a gift you were giving her. And then you brought her to the same resort you sent me to alone. And when that fell apart too, you went to Nimue. And when Nimue found out, you went to my mother's porch and cried. You're not choosing me, Hollis. You're choosing the last person who hasn't closed the door yet. His face changed. The softness he had walked in with just dropped away. And underneath it was something tight, something hard, something that looked a lot more like the real him. And he said, that's not fair. My father did this to my mother, and I swore I wouldn't. And then I did, and I hate myself for it. I said, I believe that part. I believe you hate yourself, but you're using that pain as a shield, and I'm not going to stand behind it with you. I stood up. Hollis reached for my hand. I pulled it back. He said, so that's it? 2 years and you won't even try? I looked at him and I said, you didn't try, Hollis. You performed. For 2 years you performed a relationship while building exits on every side. I'm not the one who gave up. I'm the one who finally noticed. I walked to the door. Behind me I heard him say, you'll regret this. I turned back and I looked at him sitting there in that coffee shop with his red eyes and his shaking hands and his story that had run out of rooms to work in. And I said, no, I'll remember this. There's a difference. I walked out. The door closed behind me. I stood on the sidewalk in the morning light and I breathed. And it was the kind of breath that fills you all the way up. The kind that reaches the bottom of your lungs and opens something that has been shut for a long time. I went home and unpacked the carry-on I had packed for 2. I put Ren's note in a drawer, not to keep as evidence, but because someone had written it with care, and it deserved better than the trash. I texted Nimue, thank you for telling me. I hope the next person you trust earns it. And she sent back a single heart. I texted Ben, you should have told me, but you told me when it mattered. We're okay. I called Octavia and said, it's done. He's not coming back. I'm okay. And she said, I know you are. I could hear it before you said it. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at my apartment. Not a text. An actual letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was 1 page in handwriting I didn't recognize. The woman introduced herself as Kara. She said she had been with Hollis for 11 months, beginning 2 years ago, when Hollis and I had been together for 3 months. She said Hollis had ended things with her when I started asking about their future, and she hadn't understood why until she saw an engagement announcement photo on his social media and recognized me as someone she had once passed in a restaurant while she was out with Hollis. And Hollis had described me to her as a coworker. She said she had found my address through a mutual connection and had written the letter because she needed me to know I wasn't the first. She said there was nothing I needed to do with the information. She had just needed someone to have it. At the bottom of the page, she had written one line. I thought I was the mistake. I wasn't. The whole thing was.